Welcome on board the Rich Planet Starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall, and this is Ulysses. Last year I interviewed Ben Emlyn Jones, who mentioned a document called Silent Weapons for a Quiet War. This document was allegedly found in 1979 in the possession of naval intelligence, and it is claimed that the doctrine outlined in the document was adopted by the policy committee of the secret Bilderberg Group. For those who don't know what the Bilderberg Group is, it's a secret group which meets every year in Europe or America and contains a handful of top politicians, media moguls, intelligence personnel, royalty and corporate figures from predominantly NATO countries. Notable UK members include Kenneth Clarke, Peter Mandelson and George Osborne. Some believe that this group is the real policy-making machine which steers all Western governments. The group meets in total secrecy, and the minutes from its conferences are never published for public scrutiny. You thought you lived in a democracy. Anyway, back to the document, which this group has allegedly taken guidance from. The silent weapons referred to in the document pertain mainly to techniques for controlling the masses by enslaving them economically and controlling their minds through education and the media, essentially without their knowledge. Here are some extracts from the document. In the interest of future world order, peace and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural social energy or wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible many to the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible and worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure and apply new weapons which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name silent weapons. In conclusion, the objective of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital banking and the industries of commodities or goods and services is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. In order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of the society must be brought under total control, i.e. must be housebroken, trained and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age. In order to achieve such a conformity, the lower-class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government daycare centres for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the meat of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintaining some measure of social order, peace and tranquility for the ruling upper class. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life. Yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with social daily life, i.e. unmistakable to the trained observer, one who knows what to look for. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but because of the technical nature of the silent weapon, they cannot express their feeling in a rational way, or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help, and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. When a silent weapon is applied gradually to the public adjusts and adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment into their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating and attacking their source of natural and social energy and their physical, mental and emotional strengths and weaknesses. The document goes on to explain how one of the silent weapons which should be used is economics. The document enlikens the economy to that of an electronic circuit and explains that control of the economy and money is one of the methods used to keep the low-class elements of society under control. We are observing this today with the creating of currency as debt by central banks and people like David Cameron coming out with his classic bullshit lines like, "We need to deal with the deficit," and "We're all in this together." No, we don't need to deal with the deficit, David, and no, we aren't all in this together. We need to get rid of the Bank of England, thus allowing our government to create sovereign currency itself, instead of borrowing it at interest from the Bank of England. The current financial crisis is not an accident. It has been carefully engineered by those following the principles similar to the ones set out in this document. Some call it financial terrorism. And what does the document have to say about education? Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of basic systems principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no great importance on the other hand. This is achieved by 1. Disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities by providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic, systems design, and economics, and by discouraging technical creativity. In schools, keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. And what about television and the media? The document states control of the public is achieved by engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities, by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape, by way of constant barrage of sex, violence and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers, giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. Rewriting history and subjecting the public to the deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. The general rule is that there is profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer the solutions. In entertainment, keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. In the media, keep the adult public attention diverted from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Are we not seeing this on our TV screens every day with the barrage of television shows of no real importance? For example, the plethora of dancing shows. Strictly Dancing, Ballroom Dancing, Disco Dancing, Dancing at Night, Dancing on Ice, and the soon-to-be-launched Dancing on Shite, where the contestants will hopefully fall flat on their abundantly maked-up faces. Of course, these shows are really not dancing competitions. The contestants' rippling bodies strut about, wiggling their bottoms in kinky, sexually explicit outfits, like prostitutes competing for your attention in a sleazy strip joint. Just as some of our tabloid newspapers are actually soft porn mags, thinly disguised as newspapers, these TV shows are the same. They are soft porn shows, thinly disguised as dancing competitions. In the past, I remember the show Benny Hill, which was of course soft porn, thinly disguised as a comedy show. Now, on the rich planet Starship, we have no objection at all to anybody wishing to spend their time watching pornography. We are not prudes. We are not the modern-day version of Mary Whitehouse. Just as long as those who insist on watching this tat understand exactly what it is they are glued to and why. As my physics teacher always used to say, the easiest person in the world to fool is yourself. Then we come on to the other area of no great importance, which is paraded on our TV screens every second of the day, programs about food. I don't know about you, but I'm no more interested in watching TV shows about eating food than I am in watching TV shows about having a dump. although that probably would make a far more interesting show than the shit we are served up every day on our lie boxes. As Andrew Johnson said to me the other day, the BBC, making ignorance fashionable. Well, I think I'll just remain unfashionable if it's all the same to you. Silent Weapons for a Quiet War also talks about work. In work, keep the public busy, 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 with no time to think, back on the farm with the animals. It also speaks of the artificial womb. It states, from the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed toward building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs, various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary processes of growth and maturity, i.e. survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human god to eliminate all risk from their life, pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them in bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible, so the human god, the political, meets incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So, who is the bigger liar, the public or the godfather? The public behavior is surrender born of fear, laziness, and expediency. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon useful against a disgusting public. Okay, you disgusting public, moving on. In part 3 of today's show, I'll be talking to Scott Felton. Now, Scott and I have been involved for some time now, about the last year and a half, in producing a documentary about the Berwyn Mountain UFO incident, which occurred in 1974. And I just want to say, don't believe anything you read in the papers at this present time about that event. Now, we're not going to talk too much about the Berwyn incident in the interview because we want to keep our findings close to our chest until the documentary is produced later in 2011. And I'll be asking Scott how he first became interested in the UFO subject, because he's got quite an interesting story about that. But before that, hands up, who's heard of Phobos? And no, it's not a Greek island. Phobos is actually a moon of Mars. Now, the planet Mars has two moons, one called Phobos and one called Deimos. Now, they're both quite small. Phobos is about 15 miles in diameter, and Deimos is about 8.5 miles in diameter. And astronomers believe that these moons are actually captured asteroids. Now, there's all sorts of rumors about Phobos. One of them is that it's a secret base of some time, perhaps an extraterrestrial base or even a base developed by the secret space program. Now, in 1988, the Soviets sent two unmanned space probes, Phobos-1 and Phobos-2, to examine and send back images of Mars and Phobos. Phobos-1 was lost on the way because of a software problem. But in 1989, Phobos-2 arrived at Mars, and it went into orbit around Mars. And it managed to send back 38 images in total. Now, some of the images of the surface of Mars, amazingly, showed a cigar-shaped shadow on the surface of Mars, and the shadow moved its position, and nobody could determine what the cause of the shadow was. Basically, it shouldn't have been there. Russia's plan with Phobos-2 was to move the Phobos probe into an orbit around Mars so that it was in a similar orbit alongside Phobos so that it could then take images of Phobos. But as it was coming into proximity of Phobos, according to the Russians, it was mysteriously knocked out of action, and then they just lost control of it and didn't get any more images. And there was no real reason why it should have been put out of action. Now, add to this the fact that a Russian test pilot called Maria Popovich released some photographs which she alleged were taken by the Phobos-2 probe of Phobos, which presumably had been kept secret. And the photograph showed a large cigar-shaped craft. Now, a viewer has sent in a short documentary produced all about this incident with Phobos 2 and Phobos. But it was sent in on VHS tape, so we don't really know who's produced this, but I'm going to screen it after the break. Now the quality is a little bit degraded because, as I say, it's come off a VHS tape, but it's still worth watching. So if anyone does know who has narrated and produced this piece, we'd like to know so that we can credit them, because the last part of the show was missing off the tape, so we don't know who's produced it. But fascinating nonetheless, so stay tuned for that after the break.